Congenital syphilis complications. Definition: congenital syphilis, or CS, is a disease that occurs when a mother with syphilis passes the infection onto her baby. Depends on how long the mother has had syphilis. CS cause deformed bones, severe anemia, enlarged liver, spleen, jaundice, brain and nerve problems, meningitis, skin rashes.
Will contract while still in their mother's uterus. So we'll write contract in utero or contract in uterus. So congenital syphilis is an important disease to screen for pregnant women because 2/3 of infected neonates or newborns have no symptoms. So they're without symptoms. So many of these babies will start to get features of syphilis later on. And we can split the types of symptoms that we will have based on time. So there are early symptoms, which occur from birth, so they can be present right away in that 1/3 that do have symptoms at birth, to the first few years of life. This is in contrast to late syphilis, or late congenital syphilis, where you won't see any of the symptoms I'll list here from birth, but they happen after the first few years. Now, one of the first things you might see in a newborn that's infected with syphilis is a really big liver. So let me draw a giant liver here. So this is a really big liver. And then on top of that, they could also have a giant spleen. So I'll draw the spleen really big here as well. And we refer to this when they happen together as hepato, so hepato referring to the liver, spleno, so the spleno referring, of course, to the spleen, so hepatosplenomegaly, hepatosplenomegaly. And the reason why this happens is because the white blood cells from the baby as well as from the mother are actively fighting the syphilis treponemes that are present in the liver as well as in the spleen. And the reason why these two organs are affected more than others is because the liver and the spleen are responsible for making white blood cells in fetuses as well as early on in newborns. Another early symptom you might see of congenital syphilis is the same maculopapular rash that we saw with secondary syphilis. So I'll write here again, this is a maculo, which means a flat, papular, which means a raised or bumpy lesion. So a maculopapular rash that occurs all over the body, but is very characteristic to syphilis in that it occurs on the palms and the soles of the feet. And there are only a handful of diseases that'll cause this many types of lesions on your hands. And remember, it's not just one, but several of these maculopapular lesions that are present. And then finally, the last early symptom we might see of syphilis is pneumonia. So let me just draw the lungs here. And I'll purposely draw it small because in a newborn, the lungs are still developing. So in this critical period already, we can start to get an infection of the lungs, which again is called pneumonia, because of the spread of syphilis there as well. And then later on, some of the symptoms that we'll see in an infant are related to white blood cells fighting syphilis over a long period of time. One example of this is what's referred to as a saddle nose deformity. A saddle nose deformity, which just means that the baby's nose looks like a saddle, like the same thing you'd use to ride a horse. And this is all happening because white blood cells are fighting these syphilis treponemes, producing inflammation. And this is inflammation specifically happening near the nasal cartilage. So at the nose, you'll see this characteristic divot that shows that there's been some breakdown of the nasal cartilage there. And a similar thing can happen on the shins or on your tibia bone, leading to what's referred to as saber shin deformity. And I'll write here because it affects the baby's growing tibia. And I think the name describes this condition as well, because the shins, which are usually supposed to be bumpy, tend to be very sharp in babies that have this type of deformity. And it's because the white blood cells fighting the syphilis treponemes will actually shave off the sides of the tibia bone to make it sharper than it's usually supposed to.
Application. Most commonly, transmission occurs transplacentally and it may occur at any time during gestation. However, the risk of transmission to the fetus depends on the stage of maternal infection. In general, the longer the time the primary infection, untreated primary or secondary syphilis in pregnancy results in a 25% risk of stillbirth, a 14% risk of neonatal death, a 41% risk of giving birth to a live but infected infant, and only a 20% chance of giving birth to healthy uninfected infants. Pros and cons. Pros. In the first weeks, it can be treated with Arceus, Restylane, penicillin G. Cons. Syphilis and HIV co-infection is not uncommon. Test to definitively infected infants at birth, such as EHM and DNA detection polymerase chain reaction, are considered investigational.
The Caribbean country of Haiti. It's the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, dogged for years by political unrest and violence. Hundreds of children's lives are lost every year to a hidden, age-old killer, syphilis. The deadly infection is transmitted sexually and then passed unknowingly from a mother to her unborn child. Half of the infected babies die, and those that survive can go on to become blind, deaf, and suffer brain damage. Baby Philip is being tested for the disease. He was brought to the hospital a year ago, his body covered with blisters.
He got all the symptoms. Spleen was enlarged, and also the liver was enlarged.
His life-threatening illness was caught just in time. He was given penicillin to clear the infection, which had been passed to him during his mother's pregnancy.
I was told I have syphilis, but I never had any symptoms.
Leading specialist Dr. Jean-William Pape is fully aware of the problem across the country.
We believe that syphilis would account for at least 1/5 of spontaneous abortions or neonatal death in Haiti. The major problem we have with syphilis, patients don't feel anything. They feel well.
Doctors say mothers often blame the deaths on superstition in a culture where voodoo traditions still play a dominant role in many people's lives. The result is that syphilis goes undiagnosed and continues to flourish. Lack of access to testing and treatment makes matters. In rural Haiti, a pregnant woman may have hours to reach where testing is, but simple tests, the World Health Organization changed that. Dr. Rosanna Peeling, a tropical disease researcher at TDR, led the evaluation of rapid syphilis tests to identify which ones actually worked in these remote settings where there is often no electricity or water.
It would allow you to have a laboratory diagnosis of syphilis in 15 minutes. It's very easy to use.
The treatment can then be given on the spot. The Haitian government and the World Health started a nationwide campaign to train health workers how to use these.
The potential is to save several thousand babies a year from congenital syphilis. In sub-Saharan Africa, there's a potential to save 500,000 babies.
At just 20 to 50 cents, the new test should be affordable for developing countries. The World Health Organization now plans to take it to even more remote parts of Haiti, to other hard-to-reach corners of the developing world. Doctors hope the age-old disease can at last be defeated.
Issued applied in Ecuador in May 2019. Ecuador adopted a strategy to eliminate syphilis mother-to-fetus transmission, becoming the fifth country of the region to adopt this measurement. With this strategy, the objective is to reduce the index to 0.5% of cases in 100 born eligible. Conclusion. Congenital syphilis is a severe, disabling, and often life-threatening infection seen in infants. A pregnant mother who has syphilis can spread the disease through the placenta to the unborn infant.